Welcome to the mirror.
Welcome to The Mirror. I'm Swann. Well, Mother's Day just passed, and while millions of women were posting flowers, brunches, gifts, smiling children, and beautiful family photos, there were millions of women slightly questioning the very relationships holding their homes together. Women smiling while emotionally exhausted. Women celebrating while quietly disappearing inside themselves. Women holding families together while falling apart internally. Women wondering if what they are experiencing is actually love or survival. And before we even begin this mirror, I need you to understand exactly what problem this video is here to solve. This video is here to help women recognize emotional danger before it destroys their peace, their identity, their nervous system, their children's emotional blueprint, and their future. Not after the breakdown, and not after another year of explaining away red flags, and not after the children have already learned that love means walking on eggshells. But right now, because Mother's Day has passed, the flowers are fading, the pictures are posted, the brunch is over, and now some women are sitting quietly with the truth they keep avoiding. Most women don't realize emotional exhaustion often becomes loudest after the celebrations are over. After everybody claps for what you do for others. You finally hear what you've been hiding from yourself. And for some women, that silence is terrifying because it forces them to ask, why do I feel so lonely in this relationship? Why do I feel invisible in this family? Why do I feel celebrated publicly but emotionally abandoned privately? That is why this mirror matters. Because Mother's Day can be beautiful, but it can also expose what women have been carrying quietly. It can expose the emotional labor. It can expose the loneliness. It can expose the resentment. It can expose the way some women have become the foundation for everybody else, while nobody has asked if the foundation is cracking. And in a few minutes, I'm going to explain why some women become chemically addicted to emotional instability without even realizing it. Because once you understand that, well, you can stop calling every intense feeling love. And that changes everything. So no, I am not doing this because I hate men. Absolutely not. And I'm not doing this because I am anti-marriage. I love marriage. I am not doing this because I'm anti-love. I'm doing this because too many women are ignoring their intuition until the damage reaches their children, their nervous systems, their confidence, and their identity. And after watching this powerful Women of Impact interview with Lisa and the evolutionary psychologist, Dr. Gad Saad, I knew this conversation needed to be unpacked for women in a deeper way. Not emotionally reacted to, but understood. Because whether you agree with every evolutionary argument or not, There are truths in this conversation, and they're truths that women just cannot afford to ignore anymore. Truths about control, jealousy, manipulation, fantasy bonding, trauma, emotional addiction, power, predatory behavior, and the dangerous ways women are conditioned to override themselves while trying to be chosen.
The number one most dangerous person in a woman's life in every culture that's ever been studied is her husband.
Now let's pause there, because that statement alone is enough to make some women uncomfortable. But discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes discomfort is recognition. Sometimes discomfort is your intuition finally hearing language for something your body has been trying to explain to you for years. Because many women don't realize they are emotionally unsafe until their nervous systems begin collapsing under the weight of survival. And women are masters at survival, are we not? That is part of the problem. Women survive things they should have never normalized. Emotional inconsistency, walking on eggshells, manipulation, silent punishment, emotional withholding, explosive communication, control disguised as protection, jealousy disguised as love. Most women don't realize survival mode can become identity. You adapt for so long, you stop realizing you are adapting at all. You begin rehearsing conversations before you speak. You begin studying facial expressions before you ask a question. You begin monitoring tone before you express a need. You begin shrinking your truth to avoid someone else's reaction. And eventually, you call that maturity. You call that patience. You call that keeping the peace. No, sometimes that is not peace. Sometimes that is nervous system captivity. And because there are no bruises attached to emotional erosion, women often minimize what is happening to them. But emotional instability changes the body too. It changes your sleep, your appetite, your confidence, your hormones, your stress level, memory, focus, self-esteem, and identity. Some women have become so emotionally exhausted trying to maintain relationships, they no longer even remember who they were before survival mode. That sentence matters deeply because many women are not living. They are managing emotional environments. They're managing moods, managing reactions, managing tension, managing unpredictability, managing emotional landmines, and eventually that hypervigilance becomes identity. So let me tell you what this looks like in a real life scenario. A woman hears the garage door open and immediately her stomach tightens. Not because she was physically hit and not because anybody threatened her in that moment, but because she never knows which version of him is coming through the door. Will he be kind? Will he be cold? Will he be irritated? Will he ignore her? Will he pick a fight? Will she have to tell the children to lower their voices? Will the whole house have to adjust to one person's emotional weather? Most women don't realize hypervigilance. and how it changes the nervous system biologically. It teaches your body to prepare for danger even when you're standing in your own kitchen. And after a while, you do not even call it anxiety anymore. You call it normal. You monitor tone before speaking. You rehearse conversations before bringing up concerns. You study facial expressions before expressing needs. You soften truths to avoid emotional punishment. That is not emotional safety, that is adaptation. And when women become so accustomed to adapting that they stop asking whether they are emotionally safe at all, there's a problem. Now let's talk about one of the most important concepts discussed in this Women of Impact interview: pathological jealousy. Not healthy emotional investment, not healthy concern, not emotional connection, pathological jealousy. And Dr. Gad Saad explains something women desperately need to understand. Controlling behavior escalates progressively, meaning it starts small. And that matters because women are waiting for danger to arrive loudly. But red flags rarely arrive screaming. They usually arrive charming. Most women don't realize emotional control almost always enters relationships disguised as care first. That is why it's missed. Control sounds romantic in the beginning, like, text me when you get home, darling. Oh, I was just worried about you, sweetheart. I don't trust other men around you, sexy. You're too beautiful for that outfit, darling. Your friends are a bad influence, trust me. And at first, a woman may feel chosen. She may feel protected. She may even feel desired. She may say, oh, he just loves me so much. But what if the thing making you feel chosen is actually the beginning of emotional ownership? That is where women have to become honest with themselves, because control does not always begin with yelling. Sometimes control begins with concern. Sometimes isolation begins with romance. Sometimes monitoring begins with protection.
I think men will become progressively more controlling in a relationship if they are dispositionally jealous.
You know, at first it sounds protective. Then it becomes restrictive. Then it becomes possessive. Then it becomes emotional ownership. And women often interpret emotional possession as emotional depth. And that is one of the most dangerous misunderstandings in modern relationships. Because some women mistake obsession for love. They mistake emotional intensity for intimacy. And if you were raised around instability, well, chaos can feel emotionally familiar. This is where the conversation becomes truly heartbreaking. Most women don't realize they are often attracted, yeah, I said it, attracted to emotional familiarity before emotional health. So if chaos felt normal growing up, peace can feel emotionally suspicious. If emotional withdrawal felt normal growing up, then stable affection can feel boring. If explosive arguments felt normal growing up, calm communication can feel weak. And that matters psychologically because, well, humans are often drawn toward familiarity before health. Some women grew up watching emotional inconsistency become normalized in the home. Watching mothers walk on eggshells, watching fathers emotionally withdraw, watching arguments become explosive, watching silence become punishment. So now, calm feels suspicious, peace feels unfamiliar, consistency feels boring, and emotionally unavailable people feel exciting because unpredictability activates pursuit psychologically. And social media reinforces this constantly, you guys. The mysterious man, the emotionally distant man, the wounded man, the man who does not text back, but when he does, your whole nervous system lights up. Women are being taught that emotional suffering equals emotional depth, and it does not. Most women don't realize emotional intensity is not the same thing as emotional intimacy. Okay? Intensity can be chemistry. Intimacy requires safety. Intensity can happen fast. Intimacy is built slowly. Intensity can be addictive. Intimacy is stabilizing. And this is where women need to become brutally honest with themselves. Are you pursuing love, or are you pursuing emotional activation? Because those are not the same thing. Some women feel most emotionally alive inside emotional uncertainty, waiting for texts, analyzing tone, wondering if he is pulling away, obsessing over emotional inconsistency. And what's dangerous is that social media romanticizes this constantly, this push and pull. Toxic attraction, twin flames, runner and chaser, hot and cold energy. Women are consuming psychologically unhealthy relationship dynamics packaged as romance. And that matters deeply because younger women, especially, are learning attachment through algorithms now. And algorithms reward emotional intensity, not emotional health. Think about what goes viral online: the toxic ex, the manipulative relationship, the dramatic betrayal, the narcissist story, the emotionally unavailable man, the chaotic relationship comeback. Peace rarely goes viral, but peace sustains lives. And that distinction matters. Women need to stop confusing emotional entertainment with emotional health. So let's talk about emotional unavailability, because this conversation is long overdue. Emotionally unavailable people often create the strongest emotional obsessions. Why, you ask? Well, because uncertainty activates pursuit. If somebody gives you affection inconsistently, well, your brain stays emotionally engaged, trying to predict emotional reward. And this creates something psychologists often compare to gambling reinforcement systems, right? You guys know people like that. You keep emotionally investing because the reward is unpredictable. A text today, distance tomorrow, affection tonight, withdrawal next week, warmth in the morning, coldness by dinner. And women start confusing emotional pursuit with emotional intimacy. But obsession is not intimacy. Anxiety is not intimacy. Emotional confusion is not intimacy. Most women don't realize they are not always addicted to the person. Sometimes they are addicted to the hope. Hope that this version will finally change. Hope that this apology is real. Hope that this cycle will stop. Hope that if they love harder, explain better, forgive longer, sacrifice more, the relationship will become what they always imagined. And hope can keep women emotionally trapped for years. Now, let's go even a little deeper, because women need to hear this next part clearly and loud. Some women are addicted to earning love. So that sentence alone could change lives, okay? Many women grow up emotionally conditioned to believe love must be earned through performance. Being understanding enough, patient enough, beautiful enough, loyal enough, helpful enough, quiet enough, forgiving enough, sacrificial enough, enough. And because of that conditioning, many women remain inside emotionally harmful dynamics, trying to prove they are worthy of receiving stable love. But healthy love is not supposed to feel like emotional labor all the time. And this is where Lisa, her transparency matters so very much, because she openly talks about how she spent years overperforming emotionally, trying to maintain peace and stability in her life. And that resonates with women deeply, because women are often socially conditioned into emotional caregiving identities. Women become therapists, emotional regulators, caretakers, fixers, peacekeepers, and eventually many women stop asking, "What do I need emotionally?" and start asking, "How do I keep everybody else emotionally stable?" That is emotional self-abandonment. And when women do it so gradually, they often don't realize they disappeared until years later. So let's talk about one of the most important psychological concepts from this interview: the fundamental attribution error. This section is massive because this one concept alone explains why so many women ignore red flags for years.
One of the things that we talk about in psychology is whether a phenomenon is a situational one or a dispositional one. Situational means it's the situation at hand. You sat there being very flirty with this guy, that in this one situation, and he happened to be gorgeous and so on, that I felt jealous. But dispositionally, my disposition is I'm not a jealous person. Right. So it's very important when we're ascribing causality to things in our lives to establish whether they're due to the situation or to the disposition, right? And by the way, there's literally a psychological bias called the fundamental attribution error, which speaks to that, whereby you attribute, for example, situational causation to something when it should have been dispositional. So this guy that I'm starting to date is exhibiting a lot of jealousy traits. Because I like him and I don't want this to serve as a red flag, I will attribute it to a situational factor. Oh, it's probably because I was dressed very sexily and I was dancing. Whereas the reality is, I should have actually attributed to his disposition. And it doesn't matter what I wear and how I act, this guy's always going to be pathologically controlling.
And will you only see the disposition over time?
If your eyes are open, you should be able to pick up those cues. But as we said earlier, oftentimes we put on those rose-colored prism glasses because we don't want to see those flags. So,
women constantly explain away behavior as temporary. Oh, he only acted like that because he's stressed. He only exploded because he well, he had a rough childhood. Or he only became controlling because he loves me. He only lied because he's insecure. He only withdrew because he's afraid. And Dr. Saad explains something powerful. Sometimes behavior is not situational. Sometimes it's dispositional, meaning that behavior is part of who the person actually is. Now, that is terrifying when you think about it deeply, because many women stay emotionally invested in fantasy versions of the people they're with while ignoring behavioral patterns happening consistently in reality. Most women don't realize patterns. They don't realize patterns matter more than apologies. Anybody can apologize emotionally. Anybody can cry after hurting you. Anybody can promise to do better when they feel you pulling away. But patterns reveal character, not promises, not apologies, and not potential. Patterns. Your nervous system notices patterns before your conscious mind fully accepts them. That anxiety before he gets home, that exhaustion after conversations, that confusion after emotional conflict, that emotional fog, that pit in your stomach, that hyper awareness, that emotional shrinking. Your body notices before your brain explains. That anxiety, that exhaustion, that emotional confusion. Well, most women don't realize the body often recognizes emotional danger before the conscious mind accepts it. But women override intuition constantly because women are taught to prioritize everybody else's comfort over their own instincts. And eventually, many women become disconnected from their warning systems entirely. So let's go deeper again, because this next section is one of the most important parts of this mirror episode. Some women watching this are not in love. They are trauma bonded. And women need language for this because so many blame themselves without really understanding what is actually happening psychologically. Trauma bonding. That's when pain and affection become psychologically intertwined. The same person hurting you becomes the same person comforting you. So your nervous system stops chasing peace and starts chasing relief. That distinction changes everything, doesn't it? Healthy love feels emotionally safe. Trauma bonding feels emotionally addictive. Healthy love allows rest. Trauma bonding creates hypervigilance. Healthy love feels consistent. Trauma bonding feels emotionally intoxicating. Most women don't realize trauma bonds feel like love. That is why women return repeatedly to relationships that hurt them. Because the same person creating emotional pain becomes the same person temporarily relieving it. And the nervous system becomes so addicted to relief instead of peace. And because intermittent affection activates dopamine psychologically, well, toxic relationships can literally become chemically addictive. Okay? That is why women return repeatedly, I'm saying over and over and over again, to relationships that are hurting them. Not because they're weak. Don't do that to yourself. Understand it's because your nervous system became conditioned around emotional unpredictability. And this is where women need compassion for themselves instead of blame. Because trauma bonding often follows a specific emotional cycle. Love bombing, attachment, withdrawal, confusion, reconnection, relief, then repetition. And women start chasing emotional relief instead of emotional peace. And that sentence matters. So let's talk about love bombing, because women desperately need to understand this concept more deeply. Love bombing is intense emotional attention designed to create rapid, you hear me? Rapid attachment, constant texting, fast emotional intimacy, constant compliments, future promises, soulmate language, immediate emotional dependence. Ah, you're different. You know, I've never opened up like this before. I feel so safe with you. You are my peace. You understand me better than anyone else. Most women don't realize intensity is not the same thing as emotional safety. Fast connection, fast vulnerability, fast attachment, those things can bypass discernment entirely. And emotionally vulnerable women often interpret intensity as sincerity. That's why it's so dangerous, because some manipulative people mirror your emotional needs back to you strategically. If you crave validation, they become validating. If you crave emotional intimacy, they become emotionally expressive. If you crave protection, they become protective. And because emotionally starved women are deeply impacted by emotional attention, attachment, well, it forms quickly. But eventually, emotional withdrawal begins. And this is where narcissistic cycling starts. Now, let's discuss narcissistic cycling, because women need language for this too. Narcissistic cycling often follows 4 stages: idealization, devaluation, discard, and reconnection. First, you are idealized. You feel chosen, special, desired, seen. Then criticism begins slowly. Confusion begins slowly. Distance begins slowly. Emotional inconsistency begins slowly. Then emotional punishment begins. Withdrawal, coldness, silence, withholding, criticism, emotional instability. Then once you emotionally detach, they reconnect. Affection returns. Attention returns. Hope returns. And women often become addicted to getting back to the person they met in the beginning. But here's the truth. Here is the plain, painful truth many women avoid. Sometimes the beginning was manipulation too. That sentence matters deeply, you guys. Sometimes the version of him you miss the most was a performance. And that realization breaks women emotionally, because they realize they were emotionally attached to potential and not patterns. Most women don't realize emotional inconsistency creates obsession psychologically and not love. Obsession because unpredictability activates pursuit. One day affection, next day distance. One day closeness, next day emotional withdrawal. and women start chasing emotional stability like survival. That's why women must stop evaluating relationships based solely on chemistry. Chemistry lies. Patterns reveal truth. So let's talk about emotional withholding, because this destroys women psychologically over time. Emotional withholding when emotional closeness becomes conditional. Affection becomes conditional. Communication becomes conditional. Warmth becomes conditional. Peace also becomes conditional. You only receive emotional connection when you stop asking questions, when you stop expressing needs, when you stop challenging unhealthy behavior. And eventually, women begin emotionally self-abandoning to maintain emotional access. And that is so dangerous, you guys, psychologically, because eventually you stop asking, what do I need emotionally? And you know what you do? You start asking, what version of me keeps the relationship emotionally stable? That is identity erosion. Most women don't realize self-abandonment happens gradually. One silence at a time. One excuse at a time. One emotional compromise at a time. Until one day, they no longer recognize themselves emotionally. So let's move into another major section from this Women of Impact interview. The fantasy of changing emotionally dangerous people.
He's only kind with the one woman who's trying to rein him in, but with the outside world, he's a ferocious tiger who wrestles alligators on a six-pack, right? But he could only be tamed.
Only be tamed by one woman.
By one woman, who is that woman?
Yeah,
so that woman is the one who is seeing those red flags, but she goes, I could change him. I could tame him. I think I've got a shot here. And so I think one of the reasons why you don't pay attention to those red flags is because you come in with this overestimation of your ability to tame that guy.
Wow, so we think so highly of ourselves that we can tame someone.
Now, this may honestly be the emotional center of the entire mirror that I'm bringing to you today, because this fantasy has emotionally tracked women for generations. Women fall in love with future versions, potential, possibility, fantasy, but not reality. And society romanticizes this constantly. The dangerous man, the emotionally unavailable man, the wounded man, the misunderstood man. Women convince themselves, he's different with me. I understand him. Oh, I can heal him. I can soften him. I can save him. But healing someone is not the same thing as being safe with someone. That distinction changes lives, because many women are not in relationships. They are in emotional rehabilitation projects, and they keep sacrificing themselves trying to emotionally rescue people who refuse accountability. Oh, there's that word. A woman says, oh, but I see his potential. And that sounds beautiful until you realize some women spend decades dating potential while reality quietly destroys them. Potential is not protection. You cannot love somebody into emotional health. You can't sacrifice yourself enough to heal emotional dysfunction. And women who build relationships around potential often ignore reality until emotional damage already exists. Potential is not protection. Charm is not safety. Chemistry is not compatibility. Attraction is not evidence of emotional maturity. So let's talk about another major section, because this part is incredibly modern and viral ready. The soft boy strategy.
And then I thought about how these become little manipulation tactics.
Yeah.
Like there's this new common phrase these days, I don't know if you heard it, called the soft boy strategy, where it's the new version of the grandiose narcissist. So it's the person that plays a role that says, I'm going to show you that I'm into therapy.
Yes.
I read the books. You can trust me. And what happens is, if you're a woman who's been manipulated and abused before, you're like, this is the opposite of what I know. So he must be safe.
Exactly.
Therefore, you give yourself over, you drop your guard, and the soft boy strategy ends up working, that then now they've hooked you.
So here I am feigning that I have a psychic injury, and that if I'm going to therapy, look, I'm a wounded bird, right?
This part matters because manipulation evolved culturally. Yeah, years ago, women were warned about aggressive narcissists. Now manipulation can, look emotionally intelligent, therapy language, sensitivity, vulnerability, self-awareness, trauma language, emotional fluency, and again, not every emotionally expressive man is manipulative, but predators adapt to culture. That sentence deserves to sit heavily with everyone. Predators adapt to culture. So when women become more aware of overt manipulation, well, manipulation becomes softer. Now, some emotionally manipulative people appear spiritually evolved, emotionally conscious, emotionally aware, safe, and therapeutic. And women lower boundaries because emotional language creates perceived emotional safety. Okay? Most women don't realize manipulation evolved culturally. Now, manipulation can look emotionally intelligent, all right? That's their therapy language, their vulnerability, their sensitivity, their emotional awareness. And predators adapt to culture. Watch the patterns, not vocabulary. Watch consistency, not charisma. Watch accountability, not image. Watch how somebody handles boundaries. That's a big one. Watch how somebody handles frustration. Watch how somebody handles your independence. That's another big one. Watch how somebody handles rejection. Okay? Pressure reveals character. And this is why the Ted Bundy conversation matters psychologically, because even serial predators understood how to weaponize empathy.
So serial killers literally use a similar strategy with a cast.
Oh, yes.
Or a sling. Actually, that's in
Ted Bundy did it.
Exactly right. So in Suicidal Empathy, I actually reference that. So I reference the Ted Bundy case, and I also reference a fictitious case, but that's based in reality, that's in Silence of the Lambs.
Yes. With the sofa.
The sofa, right? So he can't, could you please help me? And if you remember to our earlier point, she pauses.
Yes.
And her red flag is going up, but then she brings it down. No, could you go in first? Remember he says to her,
yes.
You go in.
Yes, and I'll be able to lift it.
I'll be able to lift it. So all of the red flags were there, but because you probably didn't want to offend him, because he looks like he is incapacitated, I use that empathy ruse to my advantage.
That's so powerful.
Women's instincts often activate immediately, but empathy overrides intuition. That's why women must stop believing kindness. Kindness requires self-abandonment because it doesn't. You are not obligated to override instincts to prove you are compassionate. Okay? So let's discuss another major concept women need to understand. And this is the dark triad. This is one of the most important psychological frameworks women should understand right now. The dark triad refers to three manipulative personality traits associated with exploitative behavior: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Later, researchers expanded this into the dark tetrad by adding sadism. Now, let's define these properly because social media has completely watered these concepts down. Narcissism means grandiosity, entitlement, need for admiration, lack of empathy, and emotional self-importance. Machiavellianism means strategic manipulation, calculated behavior, adaptive deception, and emotional positioning. Psychopathy means lack of remorse, lack of empathy, shallow emotional attachment, impulsivity, and willingness to harm without emotional distress. Sadism means enjoying another person's suffering. Most women don't realize manipulative personalities rarely appear dangerous immediately. They often appear charming, funny, successful, confident, emotionally attentive, and socially magnetic. That is why discernment matters more than attraction. And emotionally deprived women are particularly vulnerable to emotional attention because validation feels intoxicating after deprivation. And why does that matter? Well, it matters deeply because manipulators study emotional hunger. So let's discuss fantasy bonding because this destroys discernment. Fantasy bonding is when women emotionally attach to the idea of the relationship instead of the actual relationship. Like the future, or the image, or the fantasy, or the dream, or even the lifestyle and the identity. And social media intensifies fantasy bonding constantly. Matching outfits, luxury vacations, proposal videos, couple aesthetics, engagement photos. Meanwhile, some women are emotionally drowning behind beautiful pictures. Most women don't realize they are sometimes grieving the fantasy, not the actual relationship. The future they imagined, the version of him they hoped existed, the life they mentally created. And when women compare aesthetics instead of emotional safety, it doesn't turn out that good. But relationships are not successful because they photograph beautifully. Relationships are successful when peace exists, honesty exists, emotional safety exists, respect survives conflict, identity survives intimacy. So let's talk about attachment styles because women desperately need education around this topic. Attachment styles shape emotional bonding. Secure attachment means comfort with intimacy and independence. Anxious attachment means fear of abandonment, overanalyzing, need for reassurance, and emotional hypervigilance. Avoidant attachment means discomfort with closeness, withdrawal, and emotional distancing. Disorganized attachment means craving intimacy while simultaneously fearing it. Most women don't realize their attachment style quietly shapes who feels emotionally attractive to them. Anxious attachment often chases avoidance. Avoidance often intensifies pursuit, and women mistake emotional pursuit for emotional depth. Toxic relationships often form between anxious and avoidant attachment styles. One person chases, one withdraws. One pursues, one distances. And inconsistency creates emotional obsession, not healthy intimacy. And this is why emotionally unavailable people can feel intoxicating psychologically, not because they are healthy, but because unpredictability activates emotional pursuit. And women often mistake emotional pursuit for emotional depth. So that should change everything in your mind. So let's discuss walking on eggshells, because this destroys nervous systems slowly. Walking on eggshells means constantly monitoring emotional environments to avoid triggering instability. You become emotionally strategic. You rehearse sentences. You soften truths. You monitor reactions. You anticipate conflict. You suppress needs. Most women don't realize walking on eggshells is emotional captivity. You rehearse emotions before speaking. You monitor reactions constantly. Suppress needs to maintain peace. And that is not intimacy. That is survival adaptation. Eventually, you stop feeling emotionally free inside your own life. And that's not love. That is nervous system captivity. And women stay in these dynamics for years because emotional erosion happens slowly. You stop laughing fully. Stop resting fully. Stop trusting yourself. Stop speaking honestly. Stop feeling emotionally safe. And one day you realize, I disappeared emotionally trying to maintain peace. Now, I want to talk about another important concept missing from modern relationships, and it's called emotional labor imbalance. Because women are exhausted, not just physically, emotionally, planning everything, managing emotions, maintaining the peace, remembering birthdays, navigating conflict, regulating children, anticipating needs, monitoring moods, and many women are carrying invisible emotional workloads nobody acknowledges. Most women don't realize emotional labor is exhausting them psychologically. Managing emotions, maintaining peace, just trying to remember everything, regulating everybody else emotionally. Women carry invisible workloads constantly. And that matters psychologically because chronic emotional labor creates resentment. And resentment is one of the fastest killers of emotional intimacy. Now, I want to address women who are listening to this and realizing they ignored red flags because they were afraid of starting over. And yes, I can attest the fear is real, especially for mothers, especially for women over 40, over 50, over 60, especially for women who already invested years into relationships emotionally. And this is why women, they kind of rationalize dysfunction sometimes. Maybe it's not that bad. Or at least I'm not alone. Or at least he provides. Or at least he comes home. And women begin negotiating with emotional pain because uncertainty feels more terrifying than familiarity. But familiar pain is still pain. And that sentence matters too. Familiar pain is still pain. Most women don't realize they stay emotionally trapped simply because uncertainty feels scarier than dysfunction. But familiar suffering is still suffering. So let's talk about emotional identity loss, because this part is devastating for many women. Some women have not heard themselves laugh authentically in years. Some women have not rested emotionally in years. Some women cannot remember the last time they felt emotionally safe enough to fully exhale. And survival mode changes personality. Women become quieter, smaller, more anxious, more emotionally guarded, more hyper aware, more disconnected from joy. And then society says, why are women so bitter now? Because emotional exhaustion changes people. And women who continuously suppress emotional truth, well, they eventually become emotionally numb. Most women don't realize numbness is not peace. Numbness is often the nervous system saying, you know what, I cannot keep this feeling much longer and still function. I can't do it. So let's talk about daughters specifically, because daughters are always watching how mothers tolerate disrespect, watching how mothers silence themselves, watching how mothers abandon needs, watching how mothers accept emotional inconsistency, and daughters internalize relational blueprints silently. Most women don't realize daughters internalize what women tolerate long before they intellectually understand relationships. Your daughter is studying your boundaries right now. Your daughter is studying your silence. She's studying your self-worth. And that matters deeply, because one day your daughter may normalize emotional dysfunction, not because you verbally taught her to, but because she watched you survive it. And sons, well, sons are watching too, watching how women are treated, watching how conflict is handled, watching emotional accountability, watching emotional power dynamics. Children learn relationships before they understand relationships intellectually. They simply absorb them emotionally first. And that's why healing matters beyond the individual woman. Healing changes family systems. Healing changes generational patterns. Healing changes emotional inheritance. So I want to return to something Dr. Gad Saad discusses, because this part is psychologically critical for every woman. The importance of discernment over emotion. Emotions are powerful, but emotions are not always accurate indicators of safety. And that matters. Some women feel strongest emotional chemistry with emotionally dangerous people. Not because danger equals love, because emotional unpredictability activates intensity. And many women were never taught how to evaluate character properly. Instead, women are often taught to prioritize charm, confidence, status, attraction, validation, and excitement. But character reveals itself through consistency, not performance, not charisma, consistency. How does someone handle conflict? How do they handle boundaries? How do they handle frustration? How do they handle your independence? How do they handle hearing no? Those moments reveal character more than romantic gestures ever will. Most women don't realize boundaries reveal relationship health faster than chemistry ever will. Healthy people respect boundaries, okay? Manipulative people pressure them, and that distinction changes lives. So let's talk about another major issue affecting women psychologically right now: the illusion of endless options. Social media and dating apps created a culture where people are constantly comparing relationships, comparing lifestyles, comparing beauty, comparing attention, comparing intimacy. And this comparison culture has made many women deeply anxious relationally. Women constantly wonder, am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I attractive enough? Am I replaceable? And manipulative people exploit insecurity. And that matters deeply because emotionally insecure women often tolerate emotionally harmful treatment longer because they fear abandonment more than dysfunction. Scary but true. And fear changes discernment. So let's talk about shame. Because shame traps women inside silence. Some women don't leave unhealthy relationships because they are embarrassed. They are embarrassed they'll be ignored. Embarrassed they ignored warnings. Embarrassed they stayed. Embarrassed they defended somebody publicly. Embarrassed they built families with emotionally unhealthy people. And shame keeps women isolated. But awareness heals what shame hides. And that sentence matters. Awareness heals what shame hides. And women need compassionate honesty, not condemnation. Because some women listening to this are already emotionally breaking internally, hearing themselves inside this conversation. And I understand. So let's talk about self-worth, because this conversation ultimately returns there repeatedly. Women with strong self-worth still experience heartbreak. Don't get it twisted. They still experience betrayal, and they still experience manipulation. But women with strong self-worth leave faster. And that's the difference, okay? Because self-worth changes tolerance. And many women have been taught self-sacrifice more than self-respect. That conditioning runs deep culturally. Good women endure. Good women forgive. Good women stay. Good women nurture. But nowhere are women sufficiently taught that good women protect themselves too? Okay? Good women require emotional accountability too. Good women deserve emotional peace too. So I want to discuss another concept women desperately need language for, and that's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort people experience when reality conflicts with emotional belief. So, for example, you believe somebody loves you, but their behavior continuously harms you. And instead of adjusting the belief, many women adjust reality. Oh, he didn't mean it. Oh, he's trying. He's wounded. No, he does. He loves me in his own way. Most women don't realize they are mentally rewriting reality to protect emotional attachment. And that psychological conflict exhausts women emotionally. It happens all the time, you guys, because eventually you are no longer processing truth clearly. You are protecting emotional investments. So let's discuss loneliness, because loneliness drives many unhealthy relational decisions. Loneliness is powerful. Women do not talk honestly enough about how terrifying starting over can feel emotionally, especially after years, marriage, children, shared history, and manipulative people know loneliness increases vulnerability, right? That's why emotionally manipulative people often isolate women from emotionally supportive environments first. They start with friends, then family, then community, and then their confidence, because isolated women are easier to emotionally control. So let's talk about peace. And I mean real peace, not performative peace, not temporary peace after conflict, not silence mistaken for peace. I mean real peace. Peace where your nervous system can fully rest. Peace where honesty does not create fear. Peace where communication does not require emotional calculations. Peace where individuality survives intimacy. Most women don't realize peace changes women biologically. You sleep differently. You breathe differently. You think differently. You exist differently. And women who have survived emotional instability often cry when they finally experience emotional safety, because their bodies realize how long they've lived in tension. And yeah, again, that part matters deeply. Now, I want to speak directly to women who are realizing I ignored myself, because many women did. Ignored instincts, ignored discomfort, ignored fear, ignored intuition, ignored emotional exhaustion. And it's not because they were stupid. It's because they wanted love. And that human desire is powerful. But women must stop believing self-abandonment is the price of intimacy. That belief destroys women slowly. So before I leave you tonight, I want to say something directly to every woman who stayed through the entire Mirror episode. If this conversation stirred something inside you, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you emotional, if it made you pause, if it made you recognize yourself, that is not accidental. That is awareness trying to wake you up. Because the truth is, many women spend years trying to save relationships while slowly losing themselves. And sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the red flag itself. It's how long we negotiate with it, how long we explain it away, how long we minimize it, how long we keep hoping instead of observing. And I know some women listening tonight are realizing, I ignored my intuition. I abandoned myself. I normalized emotional exhaustion. I kept trying to heal people who were hurting me. I confused survival with love. And if that's you, I need you to hear me carefully. You are not weak for recognizing yourself in this conversation. You're simply waking up, and that's different. Awareness is painful before it becomes freedom. And healing is not just about leaving unhealthy people. Healing is about learning why unhealthy dynamics felt emotionally familiar in the first place. And that is the deeper work. And that is the real work. And that is why the mirror exists. The mirror is not here to shame you, okay? It's not here to attack men, and it's not here to create fear. The mirror exists so women can finally see clearly, see their patterns, see their wounds, see their emotional blind spots, see their strength, see their value, see the places they abandon themselves just trying to be loved. Because once you can truly see, you can finally choose differently. And ladies, that choice changes generations. It changes your children. It changes your peace. It changes your confidence. It changes your nervous system. It changes the relationships your daughters normalize. It changes the relationships your sons eventually create. And that's why this matters. This is bigger than dating advice. This is emotional survival, emotional awareness, emotional freedom. And I believe there are women watching this right now who have spent so much time trying to hold everybody else together that they simply forgot they deserve peace too. You deserve relationships where you can exhale. Relationships where honesty doesn't create fear. Relationships where your nervous system is not constantly preparing for emotional instability. Relationships where you don't have to abandon yourself to remain loved. That is not too much to ask for. That is emotional health. And so before I close this Mirror's episode tonight, I need every woman watching this to hear me clearly. Emotional instability affects finances. Finances affect stress. Stress affects parenting. Parenting affects children. Children affect future generations. Everything is connected. And that is why I created Holistic Coaching with Monet. This is not just relationship coaching. This is whole life alignment, emotional healing, family coaching, financial literacy, insurance education, legacy planning, generational communication, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, learning how to build emotional stability and financial security together for years to come. Most women don't realize they are trying to heal emotionally while their finances, stress levels, and family systems remain unstable, simultaneously. And that's why healing keeps collapsing. You can sit down with a real coach and begin rebuilding intentionally, not just emotionally, holistically. A real conversation, a real strategy, a real healing process. Imagine 3 generations sitting together, grandmother, mother, daughter, finally learning how to communicate, to heal, to plan financially, to protect themselves emotionally, and build stability together. That is bigger than coaching. That is legacy restoration. And if this mirror spoke to you, if you recognize yourself somewhere in this conversation, if you know it is time to stop surviving emotionally and finally rebuild consciously, go to monayswann.life. Join us for the mirror every Saturday. Subscribe and like this episode. Comment what resonated. Share this with another woman, because the YouTube flywheel matters. Every share, every comment, every subscription, every like, it pushes this message towards another woman who may desperately need it. A woman silently walking on eggshells. A woman emotionally exhausted. A mother quietly disappearing inside survival mode. A daughter learning patterns she does not yet have language for. A grandmother carrying wisdom she has never been invited to share. Some women do not need judgment. They need language. They need awareness. They need community. They need somebody to finally say, you're not crazy for feeling what you feel. And maybe this mirror found you at exactly the right time. Maybe after Mother's Day, after the flowers, after the smiles, after the pictures, and after the performance. You finally needed somebody just to remind you to look in your mirror honestly, not at him, at yourself, at your patterns, at your pain, at your worth, at your future, because your intuition has probably been whispering long before your life started screaming. And just maybe tonight, for the first time in a long time, you finally heard yourself clearly, and maybe this became the moment you stopped surviving, stopped shrinking, stopped negotiating with red flags, and started seeing yourself again. I'm Monet Swann, and I love you. Give yourself the ability to love and live again with the mirror.